The Lotus nightclub pulsed with music and laughter, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the VIP section. "You can't just dismiss me like I'm nothing," she screamed over the bass. Wu Jin's expression remained carved from stone as he adjusted his cufflinks. "Sung-ho, please escort Mississippi Park out." Gently, his right-hand man moved forward, but the woman wasn't finished. "You think you're so powerful. You think every woman in Seoul wants you. Well, guess what?" She pointed a shaking finger toward the bar. "That bartender over there? She looks at you like you're dirt on her shoe. And you know what? She's right." For the first time that evening, Wu Jin's attention shifted. He followed her gesture to the bar, where a stunning black woman with natural curls pulled back in a neat bun was mixing drinks with fluid precision. She hadn't even glanced at the commotion, hadn't looked his way once all night, actually, despite serving his section 3 times already. As Sung-ho led the crying actress away, Wu Jin found himself staring. The bartender, Ella, according to her name tag, set down a martini for a customer with a genuine smile that transformed her face. She laughed at something the customer said, her whole body relaxing into the moment. She was beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. There was something authentic about her, something real in a world of carefully constructed facades. "She's different, isn't she?" Sung-ho said quietly, returning to Wu Jin's side. "She hasn't looked at me once." "Exactly." Sung-ho poured his boss a fresh whiskey. "In 2 years working here, I've never seen her flirt with a customer. Not once. She does her job, takes her tips, and goes home. The other bartenders say she's laser-focused on saving money to pay off student loans back in America." Wu Jin watched as Ella efficiently handled a drunk customer who was getting too friendly, her smile never wavering, but her body language making it crystal clear that touching wasn't welcome. The drunk got the message and backed off, apologizing. She'd handled it perfectly. No scene, no drama, just quiet competence. "What's her full name?" Sung-ho raised an eyebrow. "Boss. Her name, Sung-ho. Ella Mitchell. She teaches English during the day, bartends here 4 nights a week. Lives alone in Itaewon. Sends half her paycheck back to family in Detroit. No boyfriend, no drama, no complications. And before you ask, no, I don't think approaching her is a good idea." But Wu Jin was already standing, straightening his Tom Ford jacket. He walked to the bar and took a seat directly in front of where Ella was working. She glanced up, and for a brief second, their eyes met. Hers were dark brown, intelligent, and completely unimpressed. "What can I get you?" she asked, her tone professional and impersonal. "Whiskey." "Neat." She poured without comment, set the glass down, and turned to help another customer before he could say anything else. Wu Jin sat there for 10 minutes, nursing his drink, waiting for her to come back. When she finally did, it was only to wipe down the bar near him. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "You just did." She didn't look up from her cleaning. "What's your name?" "It's on my name tag." She moved down the bar, deliberately putting distance between them. Sung-ho appeared at Wu Jin's elbow, trying not to laugh. "I did warn you, boss." For the next 3 hours, Wu Jin stayed at that bar. He watched Ella work, watched how she remembered regular customers' orders, how she defused tense situations with a joke or a smile, how she moved with efficiency and grace through the chaos of a Friday night rush. And not once did she give him more attention than any other customer. When the club finally closed at 3 a.m., Wu Jin was still there. Ella was wiping down bottles, doing her closing duties with the same focused competence she'd shown all night. He stood and walked over, and this time, she actually looked at him, really looked at him, with eyes that seemed to see right through his expensive suit and dangerous reputation. "Is there something you need, Mr. Shin?" she asked, and the fact that she knew his name but had pretended not to all night told him everything. "Dinner. Tomorrow night." "No, thank you. I wasn't asking for a date. Just a meal. 2 people eating food. And I'm still saying no." She turned back to her bottles. "Have a good night." "Why?" That made her pause. She set down the bottle she was holding and turned to face him fully, crossing her arms. "You really want to know?" "Yes. Because I know exactly who you are and what you do. I know that you're dangerous, that you control half the illegal trade in this city, that people are terrified of you. And I know that you're used to getting what you want because everyone's too scared to say no." She held his gaze steadily. "But I'm not scared of you, Mr. Shin. I'm just not interested. You're looking for a challenge. Something to conquer because it's different. I've seen men like you my whole life. Powerful men who collect beautiful things like trophies. I'm not a trophy. I'm not a challenge. I'm just a woman trying to pay off her student loans and build a life, and I don't have time for whatever this is." The silence that followed was deafening. Behind the bar, Marco, the other closing bartender, had frozen in place, his eyes wide with shock. Nobody spoke to Shin Woo-jin like that. Nobody. But Woo-jin just smiled. It was a small smile, barely there, but genuine. "You're right." Ella blinked, clearly not expecting that response. "I'm what?" "You're right. About all of it. And you're also the first person who's been honest with me in longer than I can remember." He pulled out his wallet, left a $1,000 bill on the bar as a tip, and turned to leave. At the door, he paused and looked back. "For what it's worth, Miss Mitchell, I wasn't looking for a trophy. I was just hoping to talk to someone real for once. Good night." He walked out into the Seoul night, Sung-ho trailing behind him. His right-hand man waited until they were in the car before speaking. "That went well," Sung-ho said dryly. "It did, actually. She rejected you in front of her co-workers. She basically called you a predatory collector. How is that well?" Woo-jin stared out the window at the city lights blurring past. "Because she told me the truth. Because she wasn't afraid. Because in a world where everyone wants something from me, she genuinely wants nothing." He smiled again, that same small smile. "I think I'm in trouble, Sung-ho. Boss, please tell me you're not about to become obsessed with a woman who just turned you down." But Woo-jin was already thinking about Monday morning. The coffee shop in Itaewon where Ella worked her day shift. The one with the excellent espresso that he'd heard about, but never visited. Until now. Before you continue with this story, if you're enjoying the intense chemistry between Ella and Woo-jin, hit that like button right now. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss incredible romance stories like this one. Drop a comment below telling me, would you have rejected a mafia boss like Ella did, or would you have said yes to dinner? Let me know. Now, let's see what happens when Woo-jin doesn't take no for an answer. Monday morning arrived with gray skies and the promise of rain. Ella pushed through the door of Been There, Done That, the small coffee shop in Itaewon where she'd worked for the past year, and immediately stopped in her tracks. There, sitting at a corner table with a laptop open in front of him, looking completely out of place in his three-piece suit, was Shin Woo-jin. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered under her breath. Her co-worker, Sarah, leaned over from behind the counter. "Do you see who that is? Girl, he's been here since we opened at 7. Ordered an Americano, hasn't touched it, just keeps staring at the door. I think he's waiting for... Oh my God, he's waiting for you." Ella took a deep breath, tied on her apron, and decided to ignore him. If he wanted coffee, he could order it like everyone else. She went about her opening duties, checking the pastry case, restocking cups, adjusting the music. From the corner of her eye, she could see Woo-jin watching her, but he didn't approach. The morning rush hit at 8:30, and for the next 2 hours, Ella was too busy to think about anything except pulling espresso shots and calling out orders. When things finally slowed down around 10:30, she looked up to find Woo-jin still there, still nursing that same Americano, still watching her with those dark, intense eyes. Fine. If he wanted to play it this way, she could too. She walked over to his table, order pad in hand. "Your Americano's been cold for 3 hours. Can I get you something else? Or are you going to keep taking up a table during prime business hours?" "The coffee here really is excellent," he said, completely ignoring her pointed tone. "Someone recommended this place to me." "Uh-huh. Let me guess. Nobody recommended it. You just found out I work here and decided to show up. Is that a problem?" "It's weird, Mr. Shin. It's stalking, actually. I'm in a public coffee shop. During business hours. Ordering coffee." He finally closed his laptop and gave her his full attention. "You said I was used to getting what I want. You're right. But what I want right now is just to talk to you. As two people. Not as a crime lord and a bartender. Just as Woo-jin and Ella." Despite herself, Ella felt something soften. There was a vulnerability in his voice that she hadn't expected, a genuine loneliness that she recognized because she'd felt it herself in this foreign city, thousands of miles from home. "One conversation," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. "You've got 10 minutes before the lunch crowd hits." "Thank you." He seemed genuinely relieved. "Tell me about Detroit." "Why?" "Because I want to know where you come from. What made you into the woman who can look me in the eye and tell me no?" So Ella told him. About growing up in a neighborhood where you learned to be tough or you didn't survive. About her father working 2 jobs to put her through college. About losing him to a heart attack right before graduation. About coming to Korea because she needed to escape the grief, needed to prove to herself that she could build something on her own, without anyone's help or pity. That's why you work 2 jobs, Woo Jin said quietly. You're trying to prove something. I'm trying to pay off $60,000 in student loans. There's nothing philosophical about it. But there is. You could teach English full-time, make the same money, get more sleep. But you work at the Lotus because it's harder. Because you want to prove you can handle anything. Ella stared at him. How did you? Because I do the same thing. My grandmother raised me in Sea Demon, in a neighborhood not so different from yours in Detroit. She cleaned offices, sold vegetables, broke her back so I could eat. And I watched her suffer because we were powerless, because we had nothing. So I made sure I'd never be powerless again. But sometimes I wonder if I'm still just that scared kid, trying to prove I'm strong enough. The honesty in his voice hit Ella like a physical thing. This wasn't the smooth, calculated crime Lord everyone feared. This was something raw and real, and it terrified her how much she wanted to keep listening. Your 10 minutes are up, she said, standing abruptly. And the lunch crowd is coming. Tomorrow, he asked. Mr. Shin. Woo Jin. Please. This can't happen. You have to know that. I know it's complicated. I know I'm not the kind of man you should be talking to. But I also know that in 2 days, you've given me more real conversation than I've had in years. So I'm asking, just as Woo Jin, not as who I am in the rest of my life. Will you have coffee with me tomorrow? Really have coffee, not me sitting alone while you work. Ella looked at him, at this dangerous man who somehow seemed lost, and felt her resolve cracking. 1 coffee. That's it. Wednesday morning, before my shift. 7 a.m. His face transformed with a smile that made him look younger, almost boyish. 7 a.m. I'll be here. He was. For the next 3 weeks, every Wednesday morning, they met at Bean there, done that for coffee before Ella's shift. They talked about everything, books, music, the differences between Korean and American culture, their fears and dreams. Woo Jin told her about his grandmother, about how she died thinking he'd become a monster. Ella told him about the pressure of being the family success story, the weight of everyone's expectations. And slowly, despite all her better judgment, Ella found herself looking forward to Wednesdays. Found herself thinking about Woo Jin at odd moments. Found herself softening when she saw him at the Lotus on Friday nights. But Woo Jin's feelings were evolving into something much more intense. The Wednesday morning coffees weren't enough. He started showing up at the coffee shop other days, just to see her for a few minutes. He'd watch her at the Lotus with an intensity that made Sung-ho increasingly nervous. Boss, you need to slow down, his right-hand man said one evening. People are noticing. The other families are talking. Let them talk. It's not that simple. Ji-Yoon Park's father approached me last week about a marriage alliance. When I told him you weren't interested, he asked if it was because of the foreign bartender. Your obsession with her is becoming a liability. She's not an obsession. She's. Woo Jin stopped, unable to finish the sentence. She's what? A woman you're falling for? A woman who still keeps you at arm's length even after 3 weeks of coffee dates. Sung-ho's voice was gentle but firm. Boss, I've known you since we were kids. I've never seen you like this. And it scares me because in our world, caring about someone is the fastest way to get them killed. That night, Woo Jin made a decision. He would show Ella exactly how he felt. No more subtle coffee dates. No more patient waiting. He would make a grand gesture, the kind that left no room for doubt. He started with gifts. A Chanel bag delivered to her apartment on Thursday. She returned it Friday morning with a note. Thank you, but I can't accept this. A pair of diamond earrings on Monday. Returned Tuesday with another note. Still no. A first edition copy of her favorite novel on Wednesday. Returned Thursday. Sung-ho watched the rejected gifts pile up in Woo Jin's office and tried not to laugh. Boss, she's told you 7 times that she doesn't want your money. Maybe try listening. But Woo Jin couldn't stop. He reserved the entire VIP section of the Lotus on Saturday night. Not for a party, just for himself, so he could talk to Ella without interruption. She sent Marco to serve him all night, never coming to his section once. By 2 a.m., when the club was closing, Woo Jin was still sitting there, alone in a VIP section meant for 30 people, nursing the same drink he'd ordered hours ago. He watched Ella clean up, organizing bottles with that same efficient grace that had first caught his attention. Finally, she walked over. "Why are you doing this?" Ella's voice was tired, but there was something else there too. Confusion, maybe even hurt. Wu Jin looked up at her, and for once, he had no smooth answer. "Because I want to know you. Really know you." "No." She shook her head, setting down the tray she'd been carrying. "You want to own me. There's a difference, and I need you to understand that. That's not fair, isn't it?" She pulled out a chair and sat down, and the fact that she was finally engaging felt like both a victory and a defeat. "In the past 2 weeks, you've sent me gifts worth more than I make in 6 months. You've shown up at both my jobs. You've rented out an entire VIP section just to force my attention. That's not romance, Wu Jin. That's control. That's a powerful man trying to bend the world to his will because that's what you're used to doing. I just wanted to show you that I'm serious. That this isn't just..." "What? Just what? Just you being bored? Just you wanting the one thing you can't have?" Ella leaned forward, her eyes blazing. "I've seen men like you my whole life. Men who think everything has a price. Men who collect beautiful things like trophies because it makes them feel powerful. My father warned me about men like you before he died. He said, 'Baby girl, when a man tries to buy you instead of knowing you, run. Because he doesn't see you as a person. He sees you as a possession.'" The words hit Wu Jin like physical blows. He opened his mouth to argue, to explain, but nothing came out. Because wasn't she right? Hadn't he been trying to use his power, his money, his influence to make her notice him? To make her want him? "I'm sorry," he said finally, quietly. "You're right. About all of it." Ella blinked, clearly not expecting that. "You're what?" "You're right. I've been trying to use everything I have to make you see me, and in the process, I stopped seeing you. I stopped listening to what you were actually telling me." He stood up, pulled out his wallet, and left his usual tip on the table. "I won't bother you anymore, Ella. I'm sorry for making you uncomfortable. I'm sorry for being exactly what you warned me I was." He started to walk away, but her voice stopped him. "Wu Jin, wait." He turned back. She was standing now, her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, her expression complicated and conflicted. "I didn't tell you to stop coming for coffee on Wednesdays," she said softly. "Those mornings, those were different. That was you actually trying to know me, not trying to buy me. That was real. Is. Those mornings are real." She took a breath. "So here's what I need from you. No more gifts. No more grand gestures. No more showing up at my jobs trying to manufacture moments. If you want to know me, actually know me, then show up Wednesday morning like you have been. Bring yourself, not your money or your power. Just you. Can you do that?" Wu Jin felt something tight in his chest loosen. "Yes, I can do that." "Good." She picked up her tray again, but before she turned away, she added, "And Wu Jin? For what it's worth, I like the man who shows up on Wednesday mornings. The one who tells me about his grandmother and admits when he's scared. That man is worth getting to know." She walked away, leaving Wu Jin standing in the empty VIP section, feeling like he'd just been given a second chance at something precious. Sung Ho appeared at his elbow. "Boss, did she just reject you and give you hope at the same time?" "Yes. That woman is dangerous." "I know." Wu Jin smiled. "That's why I'm falling in love with her." The next Wednesday, Wu Jin arrived at the coffee shop at 6:45, 15 minutes early. He ordered an Americano and sat at their usual table, his hands wrapped around the warm cup, nervous in a way he hadn't been since he was a teenager. When Ella walked in at 6:58, his heart actually jumped. She saw him and smiled. A real smile, warm and genuine. She ordered her usual latte and sat down across from him. "Hi," she said. "Hi." He cleared his throat. "I want to start over." "Can we start over?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, forget everything from the past few weeks. Forget the gifts and the grand gestures and all my mistakes. Let me introduce myself properly." He held out his hand across the table. "I'm Shin Wu Jin. I'm 32 years old. I grew up poor in Demon, raised by my grandmother who I loved more than anything. I made some bad choices when I was young, and now I'm in a life I can't leave. I love jazz music, old books, and rainy days. I have trouble sleeping, and I drink too much coffee. I'm not a good man, but I'm trying to be better, and I would really like to get to know you, if you'll let me." Ella looked at his outstretched hand for a long moment. Then she reached out and shook it, her hand warm and strong in his. "I'm Ella Mitchell. I'm 28 years old. I grew up in Detroit in a neighborhood that taught me to be tough. My father was my hero, and losing him broke something in me that I'm still trying to fix. I came to Korea to escape grief and prove I could make it on my own. I love old jazz too, historical fiction, and thunderstorms. I work too hard and sleep too little, and I'm terrified of letting people get close because everyone I love eventually leaves. I'm stubborn and difficult, and I have trust issues. But I think you might be worth taking a risk on. They sat there, hands still clasped across the table, and for the first time since they'd met, there were no walls between them. No posturing, no games, just two people seeing each other clearly. Can I tell you something? Woojin said. Anything. I haven't been this scared since I was 19 years old and chose this life. Because this, whatever this is between us, matters in a way nothing has mattered in years. And that terrifies me. Me too, Ella admitted. Because I know who you are, what you do, and I should run far away from you. But I look at you and I see someone who's lonely and lost and trying to find something real in a world that's mostly fake. And I understand that because I'm doing the same thing. So what do? We take it slow. We keep having coffee on Wednesday mornings. We get to know each other like normal people, as much as that's possible given your situation. And we see where it goes. I can do slow, Woojin said, though everything in him wanted to pull her close and never let go. Can you? Because slow means no more showing up at the Lotus every night just to watch me work. It means giving me space to breathe, to think, to figure out if I'm really ready for this. What if I need to see you more than once a week? Then call me. Like a normal person. Ask me out. Give me the chance to say yes because I want to, not because you've orchestrated the situation, so I have no choice. Woojin pulled out his phone. What's your number? She laughed, and the sound was like sunlight breaking through clouds. She rattled off her number, and he saved it under Ella, with a heart emoji that made her roll her eyes. A heart emoji? Really? We just agreed to take this slow. The emoji is aspirational. You're ridiculous. You're beautiful. The words slipped out before he could stop them, raw and honest. Ella's cheeks darkened with a blush, and she looked down at her coffee. You can't just say things like that. Why not? It's true. You're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, and not just physically. The way you move through the world with your head up, refusing to bow to anyone. The way you tell me the truth even when it's hard to hear. The way you laugh with your whole body. Everything about you is beautiful, Ella Mitchell. She looked up at him, her eyes shining. You're going to make this very hard for me to take slow, aren't you? I'm going to be honest with you. Always. Even when it's inconvenient or poorly timed. Because that's what you deserve. They talked until Ella had to start her shift, and then they talked for another hour while she worked, their conversation flowing around customers and coffee orders like a river around stones. When Woojin finally left, he kissed her hand at the door, a gesture that was both old-fashioned and perfectly him. Until next Wednesday, he asked. Actually, Ella said, surprising herself, call me this weekend. Maybe we could do something. Something normal people do. Like what? I don't know. You tell me. What do normal people do in Seoul on weekends? Woojin smiled. I have no idea. I haven't been a normal person in 13 years. But I'm willing to figure it out with you. That Saturday, Woojin picked up Ella at noon in a car that shocked her. Not his usual sleek black Mercedes with tinted windows, but a regular silver SUV that could belong to anyone. You own a normal car? She asked, climbing into the passenger seat. Sung-ho owns this car. I borrowed it. Said I needed to blend in. He was wearing jeans and a simple black sweater, no designer labels visible, his hair slightly messed up from the wind. He looked younger, more relaxed, almost like a different person. Where are we going? Nami Island. Have you been? No. I've heard it's beautiful but touristy. Exactly. So touristy that nobody will recognize me. We can just be two people on a date. The drive took about an hour, and they talked the entire way. Ella told him about her nephew Devin, who was flying in from the States in 2 weeks to spend the summer with her. Woojin told her about Sung-ho, about their friendship that had survived poverty, violence, and the corruption of power. He's the only person who tells me the truth, Woojin said as he drove. Everyone else is too scared or too calculating. But Sung-ho has been warning me about you since the night we met. Warning you? About me? He says you're dangerous. That I'm changing because of you. Becoming softer, more vulnerable. In our world, vulnerability gets you killed. Ella was quiet for a moment. Is he right? Am I making you vulnerable? Yes. And I don't care. He glanced over at her. For the first time in 13 years, I feel like I'm actually living instead of just surviving. That's worth the risk. They spent the afternoon wandering the tree-lined paths of Nami Island, surrounded by couples taking selfies and families enjoying the sunshine. Nobody gave them a second glance. They were just another couple among hundreds, and the anonymity was intoxicating. They bought ridiculous matching scarves from a street vendor. They ate ice cream and tteokbokki from food stalls. They took photos on Ella's phone, silly photos, jumping in the air, making faces, being completely unself-conscious. At one point, Wu Jin bought a bouquet of wildflowers from a little girl selling them by the waterfront, and Ella's smile when he handed them to her made his chest ache. As the sun started to set, they sat by the water, and Ella leaned her head on his shoulder. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt monumental. "This is nice," she said softly. "You should do normal more often. With you, I want to." He turned to look at her, and the words came out before he could stop them. "I'm falling in love with you, Ella. I know I shouldn't. I know it's dangerous for you. But I am." She lifted her head, her eyes searching his face. "I know. I'm falling too. And it terrifies me. We can stop. I can walk away, keep you safe. Is that what you want?" "No. God, no." "Then don't. Don't decide for me what I can handle." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "I'm choosing this, Wu Jin. I'm choosing you. Scared and all." He kissed her then, gentle at first, then deeper as she responded, her hand coming up to cup his face. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "I need you to understand something," Wu Jin said, his forehead pressed against hers. "My world is dangerous. The people I deal with, the life I lead, it's not safe. Being with me puts a target on your back. I know what I'm getting into." "Do you? Really?" He pulled back to look at her properly. "There are people who would hurt you to get to me. People who would use you as leverage. I have enemies, Ella. Dangerous ones. Then protect me. That's what you do, isn't it? You built this empire to protect people. So protect me. But don't push me away because you're scared. I'm terrified." "Good. So am I. Let's be terrified together." They stayed on the island until it closed, then drove back to Seoul with Ella's head on his shoulder, her hand in his. When he walked her to her apartment building in Itaewon, he kissed her again at the door, long and slow and sweet. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked. "I work both jobs tomorrow. But call me. I like hearing your voice." He called her that night at 11, after she'd gotten home from her shift at the Lotus. They talked for 2 hours about nothing and everything. It became their routine, late-night phone calls that stretched past midnight, conversations that ranged from silly to profound. Ella's friends started noticing changes in her. She smiled more, laughed easier, seemed lighter somehow. At the Lotus, Marco cornered her one night. "Okay, Spill. What's going on with you and Mr. Shin?" "Nothing," Ella said automatically. "Girl, please. He's been coming here 3 times a week, sitting at the bar just watching you work with puppy dog eyes. And you actually smile when you see him now. So either tell me what's happening, or I'm going to start a betting pool with the other bartenders." Ella sighed. "We're seeing each other. Kind of. It's new and complicated, and I don't really know what to call it." "You're dating a mafia boss. That's what you call it." "He's more than that." "I know he is, honey. I've seen the way he looks at you. Like you're air and he's drowning. Just be careful, okay? Men like that, their world is violent. I don't want to see you get hurt." But Ella was already in too deep to be careful. She and Wu Jin spent every Wednesday morning together, and most Saturdays too. He took her to quiet restaurants in neighborhoods where nobody knew him. She introduced him to American soul food at a place in Itaewon run by a woman from Louisiana. They went to jazz clubs and art museums and once, memorably, to a Noribang where Wu Jin's surprisingly good voice on old ballads made her fall even harder. 3 weeks into their relationship, Devin arrived from Detroit. Ella picked him up at the airport, her 8-year-old nephew bouncing with excitement about spending the summer in Korea. She'd enrolled him in a day camp near an international school in a nice part of Seoul, figuring it would be good for him to make friends and practice the Korean she'd been teaching him over video calls. She didn't tell Wu Jin about Devin at first. It felt like mixing 2 parts of her life that shouldn't touch, her family and her dangerous boyfriend. But on Devin's 3rd day in Seoul, as she was picking him up from camp, everything changed. She was standing across the street from the school, scrolling through her phone while waiting for Devin's camp to let out, when she heard raised voices. She looked up, and her blood ran cold. There, In front of a small traditional restaurant about 30 feet away stood Shin Woo-jin. But this wasn't the Woo-jin who took her to islands and bought her wildflowers. This was the other Woo-jin, the crime lord. He stood with Sung-ho and two other men in dark suits, his posture rigid, his face carved from ice. And kneeling on the pavement in front of him was an elderly woman in a hanbok, her hands clasped together, pleading. Next to her, a young man, barely more than a teenager, with bruises on his face and terror in his eyes. Ella's first instinct was to look away, to pretend she hadn't seen. This wasn't her business. This was the part of Woo-jin's life she knew existed but had never witnessed. But something made her stay, made her watch. Maybe it was the dignity in the old woman's posture even as she pleaded for mercy. Maybe it was the fear in the young man's eyes that reminded her of kids she'd known growing up in Detroit. She pulled out her phone and texted Devon's camp counselor that she'd be 5 minutes late, then positioned herself behind a parked car where she could see but wouldn't be seen. Her heart was pounding as she watched the scene unfold. The old woman was speaking in Korean, and Ella caught enough to understand. The young man, her grandson, had made a mistake. Borrowed money from the wrong people. Tried to fix it by stealing from Woo-jin's operation. Now he was begging for his life, and his grandmother was begging for mercy. Ella watched as Sung-ho leaned close to Woo-jin, speaking in a low voice that she couldn't hear but could read in his body language. This situation required blood, required an example to be made. In the criminal underworld, mercy was weakness. Everyone was watching. If Woo-jin let this slide, others would see it as an invitation to disrespect him. The old woman, Mrs. Han, Ella would later learn, slowly stood, pulling her grandson up with her. Woo-jin's face was unreadable, cold as winter stone. When he spoke, his voice carried across the street. You stole from me. Do you know what that usually costs? The young man, Dae-young, could barely get the words out. Yes, sir. Woo-jin turned to Mrs. Han. And you're not begging. What? Mrs. Han lifted her chin, and despite her tears, there was steel in her voice. Because I raised my grandson to have dignity, even in his mistakes. I won't take that from him by groveling. I ask for mercy because he deserves a chance to become better than his choices. Because we are all more than our worst moments, Mr. Shin. Even you. The silence that followed felt like the world holding its breath. Ella's hands were shaking as she watched Woo-jin's face, trying to read what he was thinking. She saw something flicker across his expression, pain, recognition, memory. His jaw clenched, and for a moment, she thought he might walk away, let his men handle it the way such things were always handled. Then he spoke. Stand up. Mrs. Han slowly rose to her feet, Dae-young stumbling up beside her. Woo-jin stared at the young man for a long moment. Your debt to the Jade Dragons is cleared. I'll handle them. He paused. You work for me now. Legal work. You'll help manage my grandmother's community center in Siademan. Minimum wage. You show up late once, you disrespect the elders there once, and this conversation has a very different ending. Do you understand? Dae-young was openly crying now. Ah, yes. Yes, sir. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank your grandmother for having more courage than you do. Woo-jin reached into his jacket, and for a split second, Ella's heart stopped. But he pulled out an envelope and handed it to Mrs. Han. For your restaurant. Consider it an investment in the neighborhood. Mrs. Han's hands shook as she took it. Mr. Shin, thank you. May heaven bless you. He nodded once, then turned and walked away, his men following. Mrs. Han collapsed against Dae-young, both of them crying with relief. Across the street, hidden behind the parked car, Ella stood with her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Everything she thought she knew about Shin Woo-jin had just been turned upside down. She'd seen him choose mercy when violence was expected. She'd seen him give a second chance when his reputation demanded blood. And he'd done it when no one was watching, when there was nothing to gain, when it would actually cost him in the eyes of his world. She'd been so certain she had him figured out, a dangerous man trying to add her to his collection. But what she'd just witnessed, that was someone with depth, with compassion, with a capacity for grace that he kept buried under layers of ice because his world punished softness. Auntie, Devon's voice startled her. The camp had let out, and her nephew was running toward her with his backpack bouncing. Can we get tekbaki? Ella wiped her eyes quickly, forcing a smile. Yeah, baby. We can get tekbaki. But as they walked to the food stall, her mind was racing. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept seeing that moment. The hard, cold crime lord everyone feared, choosing kindness when he didn't have to. The way he'd looked at Mrs. Han with something like longing, like he saw someone he'd lost. The envelope of money pressed into an old woman's hands, not as a bribe or a show of power, but as genuine help. The next evening, Ella walked into the Lotus for her shift with her heart pounding. She tied on her apron with trembling hands, trying to focus on her opening duties but constantly looking toward the entrance. "You're jumpy tonight," Marco observed. "Everything okay? Is he here?" Marco raised his eyebrows. "Mr. Shin? Yeah, he's in VIP. What?" Ella didn't answer. She poured a whiskey neat, the glass chattering slightly against the bottle as her hands shook. She took a deep breath, picked up the glass, and walked to the VIP section. Sung-ho saw her coming and immediately tensed, his hand moving instinctively toward his jacket. But Woo-jin just watched her approach with those dark eyes, something wary in his expression. She set down the glass. Then, for the first time in 2 years of working at the Lotus, she sat down across from him in the VIP section. "I saw what you did," she said quietly. Woo-jin went completely still. "What are you talking about?" "Tuesday. Mrs. Han. Her grandson Dae-young. I was across the street picking up my nephew from camp." For 3 full seconds, he didn't speak. She watched emotions flicker across his face. Surprise, vulnerability, fear. "You saw that?" "I did. I didn't know you were there." "I know. That's why it mattered." She leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "Everyone told me who you are. What you are. And I believed them. I thought I knew. The dangerous crime lord. The man everyone fears. But what I saw on Tuesday, that wasn't a monster. That was someone capable of grace. It was a moment of weakness," he said, his voice rough. "In my world, mercy is." "It was a moment of strength," she interrupted. "It was the bravest thing I've ever seen anyone do. You could have, should have, by your world's rules, made an example of that boy. Everyone was watching. Your reputation demanded blood, but you chose mercy instead." Woo-jin looked down at his untouched whiskey. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "My grandmother raised me. In Siademan, in the old neighborhood. She cleaned offices at night, sold vegetables during the day, broke her back so I could eat. When I was 19, Dae-young's age, I borrowed money from the wrong people trying to save her restaurant. That's how I ended up in this life." He finally looked up at her, and his eyes were raw with old pain. "She died thinking I'd become a monster, thinking she'd failed me. And Mrs. Han reminded you of her." "Yes. So you gave her grandson the second chance nobody gave you." "I couldn't," his voice cracked. "I looked at that old woman, at her dignity, at the way she refused to beg but just asked, human to human, for mercy. And I saw my grandmother. Saw the way she used to look at me before I became this. And I thought, what if someone had shown me grace instead of pulling me deeper into darkness? What if someone had believed I could be better?" Ella felt tears burning in her eyes. "You gave him that chance. You became the person you needed when you were his age. It was selfish. I did it for me, not for him. Does that matter? You still did it. You still chose mercy when violence was easier." They sat in silence for a moment, the club pulsing around them. But in their bubble, everything was still. "I'm Ella," she said finally. "Not the bartender, or that woman, or the challenge you've been chasing. Ella Mitchell. And I want to know you. The real you. The man who remembers his grandmother and gives second chances when no one's watching." Woo-jin reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm Woo-jin. Not the crime lord or the feared boss or the monster people think I am. Just Woo-jin. The man who's terrified because he's falling in love with you and doesn't know how to keep you safe in his world." "I'm scared too," she admitted. "Because I'm falling in love with you. And that means accepting all of you. The grace and the violence, the kindness and the danger. Can you accept all of me? The woman who's stubborn and difficult and has trust issues and works 2 jobs because she's trying to prove something? I already do. I have from the moment you looked me in the eye and told me no." Ella laughed, tears spilling over. "We're a mess, aren't we? The best kind of mess." He squeezed her hand. "So what do we do now? We try. We figure it out together. We don't pretend your world isn't dangerous, but we don't let fear make our decisions either." "I can work with that." For the rest of her shift, Ella felt lighter than she had in weeks. Every time she glanced at the VIP section, Woo-jin was watching her, and instead of it feeling invasive, it felt protective. Safe. Like having someone in her corner. When the club closed, he walked her to her car, something he'd never done before because she'd never let him. This time, when he pulled her close and kissed her in the parking lot with the Seoul night around them, she kissed him back without reservation, without fear. Just two people who'd found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, choosing to trust what they'd found. Wednesday morning, he asked against her lips. And Saturday, and whenever else we can steal time. She pulled back to look at him. I want all the time with you I can get, Woo-jin. However complicated that is. You're sure? Because once we really commit to this, there's no going back to casual. I don't want casual. I want real. I want you. He kissed her again, longer this time, like he was trying to memorize the moment. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. I love you, he said. I know it's too soon, and I know it's complicated, but I love you, Ella Mitchell. I love you too, she whispered back. God help me, I do. Over the next 3 weeks, Ella and Woo-jin navigated their relationship with careful intention. They spent Wednesday mornings at the coffee shop, Saturdays exploring Seoul, and stolen hours between her shifts. Ella introduced him to Devin, who thought Mr. Shin was the coolest person ever because he knew Taekwondo and promised to teach him some moves. Woo-jin introduced her to Sung-ho properly, who remained skeptical but admitted that he'd never seen his boss this happy. Everything felt perfect, too perfect, and in the back of Ella's mind, she kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on a Tuesday morning. Ella was opening the coffee shop, humming to herself as she prepped the espresso machine when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ella Mitchell, said a distorted voice. You should be more careful about who you fall in love with. Her blood ran cold. Who is this? A friend, giving you advice. Walk away from Shin Woo-jin, or you'll learn exactly how cruel this world can be. You have 48 hours to break things off. We'll be watching. The line went dead. For a full minute, Ella just stood there, her hands shaking so badly she had to set down the coffee scoop before she dropped it. Then she grabbed her phone and called Woo-jin. He answered on the first ring. Good morning, beautiful. Someone just called me. Threatened me. Said I have 48 hours to leave you, or her voice broke. Where are you? The coffee shop. Woo-jin, I'm scared. Lock the doors. Don't let anyone in. I'm 5 minutes away. He was there in 3, bursting through the door with Sung-ho and 2 other men. His face was murderous as he pulled her into his arms. Tell me exactly what they said. She repeated the conversation, her voice steadier now that he was there. Woo-jin's jaw clenched tighter with every word. It's the Jade Dragons, Sung-ho said. Kangdae. Has to be. He's been making noise about you going soft, boss, ever since the Han situation. Then it's time we had a conversation with Kangdae. Wait. Ella pulled back. What does that mean? What are you going to do? Woo-jin's eyes were cold in a way she'd never seen directed at her. I'm going to end this threat. Permanently. You mean kill him? It wasn't a question. If necessary. No. Ella shook her head. You're not killing someone because of me. I won't. I can't be responsible for that. You're not responsible. He made the choice when he threatened you. Woo-jin cupped her face in his hands. Ella, listen to me. In my world, there are rules. You don't threaten family. You don't go after innocents. Kangdae broke both those rules. If I let this slide, every rival in Seoul will think I'm weak. They'll all come after you. So what do we do? Her voice was small. I disappear? Hide. No. You live your life, and I handle this. How? Leave that to me. She searched his face, seeing the crime lord everyone feared, but also seeing the man who'd shown mercy to Mrs. Han. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll only do what's absolutely necessary. Not what's easy or what sends a message, but what's necessary to keep me safe. Can you promise me that? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I promise. Within an hour, Ella was in Woo-jin's office above the Lotus, a space she'd never seen before. It was surprisingly tasteful, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul and shelves lined with books. Sung-ho was there with 3 other men, all looking grim. We have 48 hours, Sung-ho said. What's the play? Woo-jin stood at the window, his back to them. We don't have 48 hours. We have until Kangdae decides to act, which could be tonight. So we move first. He turned around, and his face was cold calculation. But we do this smart. Sung-ho, contact everyone who's ever had a problem with the Jade Dragons. Every business owner they've extorted, every family they've threatened. Offer them protection if they testify to the police about Kangdae's operations. Boss, since when do we involve the police? Since Kangdae made this about Ella. I won't start a war that puts civilians in the crossfire. We do this clean. He turned to another man. Jisoo, call in every favor we have with the financial sector. I want Kangdae's accounts frozen. Legal accounts, illegal accounts, everything. By tomorrow morning, he can't access a won. And his supply lines? Asked the third man. Cut them. Every connection, every route. I want him isolated and powerless. Wu Jin's smile was terrifying. We're going to dismantle his empire brick by brick without firing a single shot. Ella watched in fascination as Wu Jin orchestrated what was essentially the complete destruction of a rival criminal organization, but doing it through legal means, or at least, through means that didn't involve violence. He was using his power not to start a war, but to end one before it could begin. Over the next 48 hours, Ella stayed in Wu Jin's penthouse apartment with 2 guards outside and Devon safely with a friend's family she trusted. She watched Wu Jin work with brutal efficiency, making calls, arranging meetings, pulling strings she didn't know existed. Sung-ho was right. His boss had changed. The old Wu Jin would have just killed Kangdae and dealt with the fallout. This Wu Jin was thinking about collateral damage, about keeping civilians safe, about ending things with minimal bloodshed. By Thursday morning, Kangdae's world was collapsing. His bank accounts were frozen. His suppliers had abandoned him. Businesses he'd extorted for years were coming forward with evidence. The police had enough to put him away for decades, and they were moving in. But Kangdae himself was nowhere to be found. He's going to make a desperate move, Sung-ho said. Cornered animals are the most dangerous. Then we make sure he can't reach Ella. Wu Jin turned to her. I need you to trust me. Stay here, with the guards, until this is over. And how long will that be? As long as it takes. But Ella knew that tone. You're going after him yourself, aren't you? I'm going to end this. Not alone, you're not. Ella. Don't Ella me. I'm not some helpless princess in a tower. If Kangdae wants to come after me, let's draw him out. Use me as bait. Absolutely not. It's the only way to end this quickly. You know it is. Wu Jin and Sung-ho exchanged a look. Finally, Sung-ho spoke. She's right, boss. If Kangdae thinks he has a shot at her, he'll surface. And when he does, we'll be ready. No. Wu Jin's voice was flat. I won't risk her. You're already risking me by letting this drag out, Ella argued. Every day Kangdae is free is another day he could hurt someone I love. Devon. My co-workers. Mrs. Han and Dae-young. How many people have to be in danger because he's trying to get to you through me? Let's end this. Today. The plan was simple. Ella would go to work at the coffee shop like normal. Kangdae would make his move. And Wu Jin's men would be waiting. What they didn't expect was for Kangdae to be smart enough to realize it was a trap. Ella was wiping down tables at the coffee shop, hyper-aware of the 3 guards disguised as customers, when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Nice try, but if you want to catch me, you'll have to do better than obvious bait. Tell Shin Wu Jin to meet me at the old warehouse in Sea Demon. Alone. Or I start killing people you both care about. I'll start with the boy. Devon, right? 8 years old, brown eyes, staying at the park residence on Maple Street. Ella's hands went numb. She showed the text to the nearest guard, who immediately called Wu Jin. Within 20 minutes, Ella was back in Wu Jin's office. He was pacing like a caged tiger, rage radiating from him in waves. He knows where Devon is. How does he know where Devon is? He's been watching us this whole time, Sung-ho said grimly. Probably has eyes on everyone close to you both. So what do we do? Ella's voice was steady, but inside she was screaming. I go meet him. Alone, like he asked. It's a trap. Of course it's a trap. But if I don't go, he'll hurt Devon. Or Mrs. Han. Or any of a dozen other people. Wu Jin stopped pacing and looked at Ella. I won't let him hurt anyone because of me. Then I'm coming with you. No. Yes. He wants you isolated and vulnerable. Fine. But you don't have to face him alone. We end this together, Wu Jin. That's what you promised me. That we figure things out together. He stared at her for a long moment, then pulled her into a fierce embrace. If anything happens to you, it won't. We're going to walk in there, face this bastard, and walk out together. She pulled back to look at him. Together. That's the only way this works. The warehouse in Sea Demon was exactly as abandoned and creepy as Ella had imagined. They arrived at sunset, Wu Jin's hand tied in hers. Sung-ho and his men were positioned outside, ready to move in at the first sign of trouble. Inside, Kang-dae stood in the center of the empty space, flanked by 6 men with guns. He was younger than Ella expected, maybe 35, with cold eyes and a cruel smile. Shin Woo-jin, the great crime lord brought low by a pretty face. He looked at Ella with open contempt. And you, the woman stupid enough to think you could love a monster and not get burned. Say what you came to say, Kang-dae, Woo-jin said, his voice cold and controlled. Then let her go. Let her go? But she's the whole point. Kang-dae pulled out a gun, pointed it casually at Ella. You took everything from me. My business, my money, my reputation. So I'm going to take everything from you. Starting with her. Time seemed to slow down. Ella saw Kang-dae's finger tighten on the trigger. Saw Woo-jin moving, throwing himself in front of her. Heard the gunshot echo through the warehouse like thunder. But the bullet never reached them. One of Kang-dae's own men, a young guy who looked barely 20, had knocked his boss's arm up at the last second. The bullet hit the ceiling. I'm done, the young man said, throwing down his weapon. I'm done being part of this. You're willing to kill an innocent woman just to hurt him? That's not what I signed up for. 2 other men lowered their weapons. Then 3 more. Within seconds, Kang-dae stood alone, his gun shaking in his hand. You're weak, he spat at his former men. All of you. Weak and soft, just like him. No, Woo-jin said quietly, stepping forward. They're strong enough to know when something's wrong. Strong enough to walk away from evil. He looked at Kang-dae with something like pity. You could have built something good with your power. Instead, you chose fear and cruelty. And now you have nothing. The police arrived minutes later. Sung-ho had called them the moment the first shot was fired. Kang-dae was arrested on multiple charges, his former men turning witness against him. As the officers led him away, he looked at Woo-jin one last time. You think you've won? You think you can have a normal life with her? You're still a monster, Shin. You'll always be a monster. Woo-jin didn't respond. He just pulled Ella closer and walked out of that warehouse into the Seoul evening. 3 months later, Ella stood behind the bar at the Lotus, but everything had changed. The club had new co-ownership. Her name wasn't on the paperwork, but everyone knew. She'd quit the coffee shop and was now working part-time at the bar, while spending her days running a youth outreach program in Siademan, at the community center Woo-jin had established in his grandmother's name. Dae-young worked as her assistant, helping at-risk teenagers find alternatives to the criminal life that had almost destroyed him. Mrs. Han's restaurant was thriving, now a neighborhood landmark where community members gathered. Devin had gone back to Detroit with stories about his summer in Korea that his friends refused to believe, but he video called Ella every week asking when he could visit Uncle Gene again. On this particular Friday evening, Woo-jin walked into the Lotus as he had hundreds of times before. But now, when Ella saw him, her face lit up with genuine joy. She poured his usual whiskey and sat down across from him, something she did every night now without hesitation. Long day, she asked. Better now. He reached across the table and took her hand. Sung-ho says the community center helped 15 kids find legitimate jobs this month. 16, actually. We got another placement today. Ella smiled. Dae-young is incredible with them. He knows exactly what they're going through. Because someone gave him a second chance. Because you gave him a second chance. She squeezed his hand. You know, when we first met, I thought you were just another powerful man trying to collect beautiful things. I was so wrong. You were right about who I was then. But you saw who I could become. You saw the possibility of grace in someone everyone else had written off as a monster. Woo-jin lifted her hand to his lips. You changed my life, Ella Mitchell. You made me want to be better. And you showed me that people are complicated. That someone can be dangerous and kind, powerful and vulnerable, feared and loving. You're all of those things, Shin Woo-jin. And I love every complicated piece of you. Around them, the Lotus pulsed with music and life. But in their corner, there was peace. 2 people from completely different worlds who had found each other in the most unexpected way, who had chosen love despite the danger, who had proven that grace and second chances could change everything. Woo-jin was still a crime lord, still someone you didn't cross, still powerful and dangerous. But he was also the man who ran a community center in his grandmother's name, who gave teenagers second chances, who held Ella's hand like she was something precious he couldn't believe he got to keep. And Ella was still stubborn and independent, still working 2 jobs, still sending money home to Detroit. But she was also the woman who had looked past the monster everyone else saw and recognized the man underneath. The woman who had taught a crime lord what grace looked like. Their love story wasn't simple or easy. It was complicated and messy and sometimes scary. But it was real. And it had changed both of them in ways neither could have imagined that first night at the Lotus, when a bartender refused to be impressed by power and a crime lord discovered that the one thing he couldn't buy was the thing he wanted most. All because of a simple act of grace, witnessed by someone who chose to believe that people could be better than their worst moments. That love could grow in unexpected places. That mercy was strength, not weakness. And that sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is open your heart to someone and trust them with the truth of who you are. This was their story. The ruthless mafia boss and the woman who couldn't be bought. The love that changed everything. The lessons behind this story. Love isn't about possession, it's about recognition. Wu Jin learned that true connection comes not from buying someone's attention with gifts and grand gestures, but from being vulnerable enough to show your authentic self. Ella taught him that the greatest gift you can give someone is seeing them, really seeing them, beyond their walls and defenses. Grace has power. One moment of unexpected mercy, given when no one was watching, changed everything. Wu Jin's decision to show compassion to Mrs. Han and Dae-young revealed his capacity for goodness to the one person whose opinion mattered most. Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest transformations. People are more than their circumstances. Wu Jin was a crime lord, but he was also a grandson who mourned his grandmother, a man capable of building community centers and giving second chances. Ella was a bartender, but she was also an educator, a survivor, someone with the courage to love despite the risks. We are all complicated, containing multitudes, deserving of being seen fully. Real love requires courage. Both Ella and Wu Jin had to be brave enough to be vulnerable, to trust despite their fears, to choose each other knowing it would be difficult. Love isn't always convenient or safe, but it's worth the risk when it's real. Change is possible. Dae-young got a second chance and became someone who helped others. Wu Jin began using his power differently because someone believed he could. We are not locked into who we were. We can always choose to become better. Thank you so much for staying with Ella and Wu Jin's story until the very end. I hope their journey touched your heart the way it touched mine. If you love this story, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel for more incredible romance stories, and comment below with your thoughts. What was your favorite moment? Would you have given Wu Jin a second chance like Ella did? I love hearing from you. Remember, everyone deserves to be seen for who they truly are, not just what they appear to be. Everyone deserves grace. Everyone deserves a second chance to become better. And everyone deserves a love that sees past the surface to the beautiful, complicated truth underneath. Thank you for being here. Until next time, keep believing in the power of love, grace, and second chances. See you in the next story.